Hey everyone, welcome back to a brand new video. I'm the Chess Nerd, and today we're going to be looking at my greatest chess move ever in a classical game. So a classical game is a long game in which you play in a tournament typically, and there are prizes. In this game, I was playing a 2060 rated player, and I was 1899, as you can see, a very weak rating. In this position, stemming from a gioco piano, here my opponent played f6. And believe it or not, it's in this exact position where I played one of the most unbelievable moves of my career. It doesn't look like much. Black are just attacking my knight, I should move my knight, etc. But that's not what I do. Instead here, I take 40 minutes to make this next move. It took me from 1 hour and 10 on my clock to 30 minutes left in the entire game to make this move. Crazy, right? So in this position, after 40 minutes of thinking, I come up with a brilliant move, bishop g2. Bishop g2 was 40 minutes of work. And at this point in the game, if I didn't play bishop g2 after all the calculation, I had just wasted 40 minutes on my clock, and my opponent would have an hour and a half, and that would just not be worth it. So I played bishop g2 here, sacrificing my knight on e5. This is the greatest move and the most deep move I've ever played by far. And this is how the game went. So my opponent accepted the sacrifice, took my knight, and the idea here is I take back with my pawn and directly attack your knight. And your knight is defending the pawn on b7, which my knight is attacking. And so this goes way deeper. So knight moves, and I take on b7 with an attack on the queen, so a direct trigger, and Black's position starts to collapse little by little. Here, after taking this pawn on b7, this pawn on c6 is weak. And this rook suddenly attacks it. So now after queen moves, now I have rook takes c6, which ran through a game review was a brilliant move, although I consider my bishop g2 the most brilliant move of this game. So here I'm sacrificing my rook. If you take my rook, I have bishop takes d5 check on the king and winning the queen on c6. And so this move doesn't just take a pawn, I'm also attacking this knight twice suddenly. So we're seeing Black's position only being attacked right now, and it's going under severe threat. Pause. At this point in the game, it's crucial to look at material. Here, as you've noticed, I have 3 pawns for the piece already given. So in this position, knight e7 attacks my rook, but before moving my rook, I play knight d6, attacking this queen and taking off a layer from this discovery attack on this rook on a8. And so, once the queen moves, so if you take my knight, that's a dumb move because I take back with the e pawn, and now I have double attack on this e7 square, and if rook moves, then I just take the knight, and this is completely winning. So the queen needs to move, so queen d8, and now my knight is pinned. So I cannot just take this knight for free, because my queen would be lost on d2. So I play rook c5 here, and this is probably the second hardest move to find in this position. I had probably 5 minutes left at this point, and here the objective of this move is to put more pressure on this knight while opening up this large diagonal to attack this rook on a8. So once again here, you cannot take my knight because I take back with my e-pawn, and now I attack both your knight and your rook on a8. And if you play rook c8, so now you're enticing my rook to take, and now knight takes, and now nothing is attacked anymore. Well, here I give up my rook on c5 and take on e7. And here, if you take my rook and you think you're winning, well, then I have some news for you with a rook down, bishop d5 check. And here, king h8 would lose completely to queen d4 check, rook f6, and then we mate on f6. And if you want to take here, I invite you to because I have check, king h8, queen d4, and now this is winning. Mate in 2 moves here on g7. I was surprised by my opponent's move here, rook b8, which is using this pinned knight to tell me, look, you can't even take my knight here. Rook takes, and now rook takes, and we're completely equal, and you cannot take back on my rook. So here, I use a piece to bridge this pin on my knight, and I play bishop d5 check. Crazy move once again. What I'm saying is, now, with tempo on your king, I'm threatening your knight for real. And if you take my bishop, I have queen takes d5 check, forking this knight and winning this knight for sure. King would move, and then I have rook takes at b5, and here I have 3 pawns up is very comfortable to win. And this is the real turning point. King moved, and now I took on b5, certifying that I am winning here, winning back my original material that I sacrificed and being 3 pawns up. And now my opponent fumbles. We trade off, so knight c7 really does a good job to put pressure on this bishop to then trade off on d5. And now we trade more, and now I have 3 pawns up in a only rooks and queens endgame, and this was easy to convert because of my passed pawn here on e5. So check, and now e6. Here I'm threatening queen c3 check, so queen takes b2, and now I calculated this to perfection. This loses to queen takes, rook takes, and now e7, forcing the rook to move to e8, and I have rook d8. Only defense is rook b8, defending this rook on e8, and now I take on b8, and here my opponent resigned, because if you take here, I have e8 queen, and then after the deflected rook takes back, I take back, and I have a rook up. I hope you enjoyed this very complicated game. It was my pleasure to show it to you, as it was a stunner. I felt amazing coming back home that night from the tournament. It was super late. The game ended like at 11:30 p.m. Amazing vibes, amazing times. I hope you enjoyed.